Hello, Task Force members. I'm Ryan Asmus, FDOT Production Lead for the Suncoast Corridor. I, along with all of FDOT, want to thank you for your continued involvement in the MCORS process. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and healthy during this challenging time, and I look forward to the day when we can all meet again in person. As you know, Task Force Meeting number 5, which was scheduled to be held in March, was postponed due to concerns regarding COVID-19 and our focus on safety, health, and well-being of Floridians. Your health and safety continue to be our primary concern, and we want to comply with the recommendations of the CDC and our state and local governments. So we will hold Task Force Meeting number 5 virtually. FDOT has made the presentations which were scheduled to be given at this meeting available to the task force members in 4 online modules. These recorded modules are available anytime to the task force members via the link you utilize to log into this site. The task force member packets are available through the resource tab with the online modules, and additional resources such as public engagement comments have been emailed to you separately. We encourage you to view them at your convenience while we maintain social distancing and abide by the stay-at-home orders. As with previous task force meetings, the recordings and the task force member packets will be made available to the general public via the MCORS website. At this time, the next task force meeting date is to be determined in May, but rest assured that we will be in touch with you as soon as a new meeting schedule is prepared. Also, due to the delay in the task force schedule from COVID-19 during this past session, the legislatures did extend the submittal date of the task force report from October 1st to November 15th. Thank you for your patience and flexibility as we work together towards our ultimate goal of delivering a final report to the legislature and the governor. If there's anything that FDOT can do to help you or your community, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you again, and stay well.
Welcome to Task Force Meeting 5, Virtual Module 1. This module provides a reminder of the Sunshine Law and how it applies to this task force even when we are not meeting in person. This video is followed by a panel discussion regarding the topic of utilities. The utilities discussion was recorded at the Southwest Central Florida Corridor Task Force meeting, which was held in Sebring, Florida on March 4th, 2020. The utility panel member biographies are located within your task force member packets, which can be found on the Resources tab of this CBT.
Florida's Sunshine Law. Florida's government, in the Sunshine Law, provides a right of access to governmental proceedings at both the state and local levels. In the absence of a statutory exemption, it applies to any gathering of 2 or more members of the same board to discuss some matter which will foreseeably come before that board for action. Scope of the Sunshine Law. Board members may not engage in private discussions with each other about board business, either in person or by telephone, email, texting, or any other type of electronic communication, such as Facebook or blogging. While an individual board member is not prohibited from discussing board business with staff or non-board members, these individuals may not be used as a liaison to communicate information between board members. For example, a board member cannot ask staff to poll other board members to determine their views on a board issue. The Sunshine Law applies to advisory boards created pursuant to law or ordinance or otherwise established by public agencies or officials. Staff meetings are not normally subject to the Sunshine Law. However, staff committees may be subject to the Sunshine Law if they are deemed to be part of the decision-making process, as opposed to traditional staff functions like fact-finding or information gathering. Board meetings. While boards may adopt reasonable rules and policies to ensure orderly conduct of meetings, the Sunshine Law does not allow boards to ban non-disruptive videotaping, tape recording, or photography at public meetings. Public Records Law. Florida's Public Records Act, Chapter 119, Florida Statutes, provides a right of access to records of state and local governments, as well as private entities acting on their behalf. If materials fall within the definition of a public record, it must be disclosed to the public unless there is a statutory exemption. The term public records means all documents, papers, letters, maps, books, tapes, photographs, films, sound recordings, data processing software, or other material, regardless of the physical form, characteristics, or means of transmission. This includes electronic communication like text messaging and emails, made or received pursuant to law or ordinance, or in connection with the transaction of official business, by an agency, including a private entity action on behalf of a public agency, which are used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. Providing public records. Public records cannot be withheld at the request of the sender. A requester is not required to show a legitimate or non-commercial interest as a condition of access. A request cannot be denied because it is overbroad. Unless authorized by another statute, an agency may not require that public records requests be in writing or require the requester to identify himself or herself.
A representative from the Office of the Attorney General has been assigned to each corridor, and their contact information is shown here. If you have any questions regarding the Sunshine Law and the MCORS Task Force, please reach out to the representative for your corridor.
We're talking today about water and wastewater, as well as broadband and other utilities and how that relates to transportation. So I'm just going to quickly introduce them and then allow them to give an introduction. So we have Mark Addison with Polk County Utilities, Terry Brigman from the city of Lakeland, retired, Sterling Carroll from the Florida Rural Water Association, Eric Lobby from the city of Winter Haven. You all switched on me again. Oh, no, you're right. It's on Bill Lambert from the Hardy County Economic Development Council, and then Robert Rial for Arcadis on financial services. As we always do, we're going to open this up to questions from you all in terms of the burning issues you wanted to talk about regarding infrastructure beyond transportation. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we will do that. Please use your tent card if you turn it sideways if you have a question. I will allow one or two follow-up questions, and then we'll move on to the one or two related follow-up questions, and then we'll move on to a new question. So, yeah, it takes a minute for it to warm up. So wait till it turns green. Okay,
Testing.
there you go.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Addison. I'm the Community Investment Program Manager, or CIP Manager for Polk County Utilities in Winter Haven. I've been in that position since 2011. I'm responsible for a capital program of about $150 million. I have extensive experience in utility planning, design, and construction. I also have experience in environmental permitting, planning, and compliance, as well as water resources planning. I've been actively involved in the Polk Regional Water Cooperative and actively involved in Central Florida Water Initiative with respect to Polk County's role in that, and water resource management, and obviously water supply is a critical issue for the state. So hopefully I can speak to those issues.
Good morning. My name is Terry Brigman. For the past 12 years, I was CIO and Director of Information Technology for the City of Lakeland. In that role, from an IT perspective, I supported all of our business departments, including Lakeland Electric, our water and wastewater, public works, Lakeland Lender, regional airport, all of our business functions. In addition, the city has 350 miles of fiber that we use for our own needs, of course, which saves the city about $3 million a year. But we also use that fiber to the best of our ability to help our citizens and businesses. As she noted, at the end of 2019, I retired, so I can no longer be held accountable for anything I say. But I have lived in Lakeland since 1961. I've certainly seen a lot of changes over those 50 plus years. I plan on continuing to live in Lakeland, so I'm very supportive of the work that you're doing, and I thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes, Sterling Carroll, Florida Water. I'm the senior engineer, and I've been with them for 16 years. I have extensive experience with design of wastewater and water corridors, as well as within corridors, as well as natural gas and some electric. We, as Florida Water, we're concerned with rural communities and their ability to participate in the corridor, and look forward to the opportunity to discuss those issues that they have, as well as how the corridor can enhance the communities that it serves.
Good morning. My name is Eric Labby. I'm the Director of Economic Opportunity and Community Investment for the City of Winter Haven. I am not yet retired, and my Mayor Pro Tem is in the audience, so I am highly accountable for what I say tonight. I have about 20 years of experience in urban and regional planning. Our departments include the Building Division, the Engineering Services Division, the Planning Department, the Regional Airport, and the CRA and Neighborhoods programs for the City of Winter Haven. In Winter Haven, we have some experience with dig once policies and dark fiber, and the implications of extending those infrastructure needs in the community. In a previous life, I had the good opportunity to work with Ms. Pastide at the Central Florida Regional Planning Council and her team, and led a team that developed the Polk County Broadband Plan. So hopefully I can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Bill Lambert. I'm the Director of Economic Development in Hardee County. We also manage the Industrial Development Authority. As such, for the past 20 years, I've been involved in all aspects of rural economic development. I understand the pitfalls of how you can make infrastructure happen in a rural community. I look forward to this road. I think it's one of the greatest things that could happen to our region. We greatly support it. And as we move forward in this discussion, I hope I can shed some light on broadband. We have a ubiquitous broadband program in Hardee County, and I think we can shed some light on how to spread broadband across the rural community. Thank you.
My name is Robert Ryle, and I lead the financial services practice within Arcadis. I'm located in our firm's Orlando office. We have offices throughout the state. But through our financial services practice, we help water and sewer and stormwater utilities fund and finance infrastructure throughout the country. It's exciting to be back here in Sebring. My family, the Ryle family, settled in Florida in 1910 here in Sebring on Lake Jackson. The house is actually still there, so it was interesting to be able to go by that. I'm sure things have changed significantly since that time, and I suspect they'll continue to change here in Florida as we realize growth. And so it's very exciting to be part of this panel and this group that has an opportunity to help shape what our state's going to look like in the future. A couple of thoughts around water and sewer, that makes our industry unique. The water and sewer industry is relatively segmented. There's roughly 40,000 water providers throughout North America. Now, a lot of those are very small utilities, but even looking at the corridor that we're interested in, and looking at the number of water and sewer providers, there's quite a few. Water is a very heavy product. We move lots of it. We measure facilities in millions of gallons per day. So I think that just leads itself to water being provided on very much a local nature. We're also challenged because, with water and with a lot of different services, we have to have infrastructure in place before we can attract new customers that are going to pay for that infrastructure. So that's a significant challenge, and it's one of the reasons why debt funding for water and sewer utilities is so important, to be able to fund these projects that are necessary and allow future customers to be able to pay for them. So look forward to your questions and talking about water and sewer.
Thank you all. So with that, I am going to open it up to whoever has some questions. I know the task force has talked quite a bit about how is this infrastructure done, where are there successes in combining water, wastewater, or other utilities with transportation corridors, some of the challenges and opportunities. Any specific questions before I open that topic up to the panel? Okay, we'll get that going with to the panel. So who wants to start in terms of successes and opportunities in terms of being able to provide infrastructure in a rural environment? Maybe some challenges along the way.
Yes, I would like to. Several issues that the communities are looking forward to. They're looking forward both with excitement as well as trepidation to the community, the corridor, the impacts of downtown, the changes to the nature of the community, as well as impacts the environment. And we've talked all about that already. In these communities, if the corridor would go through, say, the middle of the community, that's the worst case. That's the oldest pipe. That's the pipe that has the worst condition. These smaller communities have seen either stagnant growth or sometimes reverse growth, and their medium household income has been sliding as well. So they're working on a shoestring budget. They haven't provided adequate asset management, and they're concerned, of course, with and they'll need technical and financial assistance with relocation. A lot of the USDA and state revolving fund are not available for relocation of utilities when it comes to corridors that are impacted by the Department of Environmental Transportation, DOT, as well as any JPAs. And so, and the costs are pretty high for these utilities, particularly with having to do with the existing and maybe even the future relocation.
So did you have any places that have done it well, or Robert, did you want to weigh in with some ideas before I'm going to turn it over to questions to we've already started to get some questions, so we'll come back to the, go ahead.
I do have some thoughts. I think Sterling's exactly right. I mean, there's very unique challenges with rural water systems. That generally, obviously, they tend to be smaller in nature. It's very difficult when you're a small utility to leverage efficiencies of scale that your larger systems can, and thus to be able to provide the same level of service. And I think, a corridor moving through a rural community has some unique challenges. There potentially could also be opportunities if there was a corridor that also allowed for utility service to follow and water and utility service began coming through and approaching some of these rural communities. I think that has the potential to provide those communities with options, right? Perhaps an option to interconnect with a larger water provider, right? To start to leverage efficiencies of scale, to no longer be responsible for the treatment of water, but be able to purchase that wholesale for the community. It may provide them an opportunity to explore whether they want to be in the water business, right? Maybe there's an opportunity to divest a water system to a larger provider, again, to leverage those efficiencies and take those funds that potentially a small community would realize from that, maybe investing in emergency services or another area of concern. So I think a corridor for small rural utilities certainly is going to have challenges, but it very well may present those communities with options that they may not have without the utility service that would follow a corridor.
So we have a question from Paul. I don't know if it's a follow-up or just a new question. Either way, it's fine.
Yeah, okay. I'm Paul Gray. I work for the Audubon Society. And I'm an ecologist by training, so all this rural development and economic enhancement is not something I'm well versed in. So I'm not going to ask you a gotcha question, but kind of a challenge question. I live in Loretta, which is only 10 miles from here. We have extreme poverty, and I want people to be able to have jobs and opportunities. But when we talk about enhancing rural areas, it almost always sounds like just turn it into a city, and then it'll be more prosperous. And working for Audubon, and this is green space out here. This is where agriculture is. This is where our water resources get originated, and they either stay here and function well, or they go to the coast. There's drainage and pollution and stuff. And is there a rural economic development model that doesn't involve just turning into a city and growth and because the growth also challenges our agricultural economy too. It fragments it and causes problems. And I just can't reconcile how are we going to get more prosperity out here without just turning it into a city, because if that's our goal, just to turn this rural area into a city, then I'm not going to be very happy about that. A lot of people aren't. So just what are your perspectives on that type of an idea? Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, you want to start?
I suppose that would be directed at me. Rural communities, especially in Florida, have languished behind. And that languishment has led to an outmigration, especially of younger children. So we have to have some changes. I've never contemplated the road turning us into a massive urban area, but I think it will make us more competitive where we can diversify our economies more. Agriculture is becoming so efficient and effective that it employs less and less people every year. So we have to recruit manufacturing firms, service industries, and if we can have efficient, effective transportation corridors to tie us to urban areas, people will choose to live in our communities, but they'll be able to make money servicing or manufacturing for these urban areas. I don't see it as taking away a rural way of life. I think it will enhance us and give us a chance to survive.
Can you then elaborate on the need for additional utilities with that?
Certainly utilities. We've been discussing utilities in Hardy County now for several months and talking about the way we're going to skin the cat. And it will help us once we know where the corridor is going to be. I can tell you that for rural communities, if the road is too far from them, the costs are going to be insurmountable for them to ever extend their existing utilities out to the road corridor. But if the road comes in proximity to those communities, I think we have a much better chance of being able to afford that infrastructure. I've talked to the folks in Fort Meade, Bowling Green, Wauchula, Zoffo. I can tell you that they all are prepared to bring their infrastructure out to a road corridor if it's within reach. I don't know whether that's 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles. I'm not certain of those costs yet, but I can tell you the closer the road is to the community, the cheaper it's, the more efficient and effective way we're going to be able to address infrastructure.
Anybody else want? Yeah, Eric, you want to weigh in? Mark? Yeah.
So if we're talking about infrastructure and we're talking about roadway infrastructure, I think that we also have to talk about broadband and technology and what sort of opportunity exists with extending those types of infrastructures into rural communities. And so I think we find in rural communities many times, because of the lack of connectivity, the lack of technology infrastructure, you're almost exempt from, you're prohibited from certain industries, certain clusters locating, within your communities and within your region. High-tech manufacturers just aren't going to come because you don't have the connectivity. Clusters like aviation or some higher ed institutions even are not really going to be looking at the rural communities because they just don't have the services that they need to operate. And so when we're thinking about corridors like this, we have to think about putting in the conduit and allowing for fiber infrastructure to extend into this region and into the immediate vicinity of these rural communities. It opens up a whole new economic opportunity for rural communities, and it doesn't have to from a land use and urban planning standpoint. It doesn't have to replace any existing industries. It supplements it. When you look at your land uses and the growth that you see in your future, you can preserve your agricultural way of life, but you can also enhance it. I know of a gentleman who operates in our region drone services, and he's counting trees and identifying diseases with utilizing drone technology instead of hiring somebody to drive a side-by-side up and down the grove and spending a month counting trees. He can get it done in a day with a drone, and it's more accurate. And so it's an opportunity to enhance what you have and then build upon that from a jobs perspective.
Terry, did you still want to weigh in?
Yeah, well,
and
that was going to be my comment exactly, is there's a lot of people that would like to get out of highly big cities and move to an urban area, but they have to have connectivity. A lot of jobs can be done from home or small office, but you have to have the broadband connectivity to do that.
Jerry?
Yeah, it's been my experience in the over 40 years that I've been dealing with water and wastewater utilities that there really are no insurmountable infrastructure problems whatsoever. I mean, the biggest one we've had as long as we've been around is the disposal of the effluent after it's done. And I can certainly see, economies of scale associated with that. I agree with everything that Bill said already in that regard. I think what we're missing sometimes when we have these discussions is really the economic problems they have in those areas are really great. It's not just a matter of it's easy for us to come here and comment on them. They can't afford to come here because a lot of them have to work and couldn't have the luxury of coming here. So the wastewater utility effluent disposal, as I've mentioned before, can be done in the rights of way, I believe. Right now, DOT has a false prohibition on that, but I think that most engineers can tell you that can be done and effectively. So you would not only have the local growth associated with industry coming to the area with a limited access highway being available, but you'd also have another effluent disposal area, so you'd be able to solve the problem at the same time you create it.
Did you want to comment about that in terms of, I know for aquifer recharge and things like that?
Sure. Okay, yeah, as far as future water supply, I know we have some representatives of the districts here. And as they know, we don't have enough traditional supply to meet future needs going out 20 years. The vast majority of this corridor is in the southern water use caution area. So water resource management is a key issue here. That includes saltwater intrusion and mitigating that, as well as having enough water for the future. So along those lines, the one water concept that DOT has adopted, taking stormwater, maybe using it to augment reclaimed water systems, maybe using it for recharge of aquifers, which would also help with the saltwater intrusion and potentially provide more traditional supply, which is going to become an issue as you build out these corridors. You're not only going to need power, but you're going to need water, and you're going to need disposal, as was just being mentioned. So those are things that need to be considered, and I think there's definitely opportunities on the water resource end. There's funding available from the district and from DEP, potentially for these type of projects. So I would certainly encourage the task force to look at that issue.
Great, so I'm going to go with Penny, and then I think it was Glenn, and then Katie, and then.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're going to have to press to hold.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Makes it better for recording. I know it's a pain.
Yeah. The thing that I trip over all the time is that this is a limited access toll road with interchanges that are spaced at, and we're not even sure the spacing of it. So are we suggesting that FDOT is going to lay this infrastructure along this road? Who's going to pay for it? The idea that, and then if it's not connected completely along the road, then this is a specious argument, isn't it?
So I think some of the panel members have talked about some opportunities to be able to help foster development when a local government needed to come through and do that. I think there was the...
So we have a little experience in the city of Winter Haven with respect to broadband, and I guess that's sort of my expertise here a little bit in working with FDOT. They were doing some work along US 27 with some of their timing of their lights and putting in some infrastructure. And we became aware of the project, and we've been implementing in the city of Winter Haven a dig once policy. And basically what that means is whenever we put in an infrastructure, could be a road, could be a water line or a new sidewalk or something like that, while we're out there doing the work, we're gonna go ahead and put in the conduit so that we can put fiber in. Conduit's very, very cheap. And we became aware of the FDOT project that they were doing on US 27, and we asked them, while you have the ditch open, while you're doing your work, can the city of Winter Haven put some conduit in so we can run fiber along US 27? And we weren't sure at first how to do that. To my knowledge, FDOT hadn't done that before. We worked out an agreement and we were able to get that done. So the city of Winter Haven paid for it. The city of Winter Haven put in the conduit and pulled our fiber. We had easements in place so that we can maintain it. And so, we now have infrastructure that goes well beyond our city limits. But we were able to do it as a municipality at pennies because FDOT already had crews out there working. We paid for the conduit, but they dug the ditch. And they just said, you can throw it in there while we have it open. And so there are opportunities for the district and municipalities or private providers to work together in this and say, while we're building this corridor, will you allow us to put the conduit in? Or will you allow us to put the water lines in? Or whatever other infrastructure that we're talking about, and how that works out. There are opportunities to get that done. I think that's what we're talking about.
And also, when we talk about transportation corridors, obviously these corridors create linear corridors. The shortest distance between 2 points, obviously, is a straight line. So a challenge for utility providers all the time is there's transportation projects that occur that don't necessarily provide enough space for utility providers. So one of my recommendations from my experience is that when you plan a corridor like this, how about planning the limited access right-of-way, and attached to that, but not part of that, would be a utility corridor or a recreational passive corridor where you could have utilities, you could have recreational opportunities, you could have, depending on what you're looking to put in there, it could be anywhere from maybe 50 feet to a couple hundred feet or more. But I think there's opportunities there, and of course, as far as how that gets paid for, obviously individual utility providers would pay for that. But again, there's a lot of opportunities for some of the smaller communities for funding. And if we're talking about regional water solutions as far as supply, and we continue to form regional cooperatives to address that, there's going to have to be corridors to wheel water around to each of these communities. So I would urge you to consider a corridor that's not just for the road, but maybe provides other opportunities for recreation, utilities, and other things along those lines.
Okay.
So I was going to respond to you, Commissioner, to your comment, but I think the panel members pretty much said what I was going to say. Typically, when we pursue transportation corridors, utilities come after we plan the transportation corridors, right? But the opportunity that's provided for us here is to look at this as a multi-use corridor, which not only talks about multimodal, but the other uses that is very relevant and needed for the rural communities. So this is the opportunity for the task force members to identify what those are. I remember in one of the task force meetings, there was conversation about connectivity between DeSoto County and Hardy County for their water sewer provisions, which is very similar to what Robert mentioned. So that's what you all need to think about through these panel conversations, listening to these panel conversations on what are those accommodations that need to be included for success of the communities to make this a reality so that the guiding principles and the needs are defined accordingly.
Just really quick. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We, about 10 years ago, decided that we must have broadband in our community, and I want to respond to your question. It may take me 30 seconds. In order to do it, we realized that we had to have a last mile provider.
I'm sorry,
and we had to have a last mile provider of internet service. And those are fairly scarce for what we needed in a rural community. The density in rural communities preclude conventional fiber cable being buried to every rural house and barn in a rural county. So we began to look at fixed wireless internet systems, and we ultimately have a fixed wireless internet system that has as its source of the internet connectivity to an ILA POP, which is an intensified light amplification point of presence of the internet that happened to be in Hardy County. We bring fiber out of that, take it up a tower, and then we deploy a middle mile internet amongst about 20 towers. And then that is delivered to each individual business or dwelling by radio communication. and it has worked extremely well. The entire infrastructure for Hardee County was not but $2 million. But if the road comes through and it gives us a pipe with more fiber, we can vastly improve the system. The greatest impediment that we've had is that in addition to fiber, we use microwave backhauls over to the television towers in Riverview and towers in Mayaca City. Those microwave backhauls are constantly having to be upgraded because the volume of bandwidth that continues to be consumed goes up. Fiber doesn't have that problem. If you put a fiber corridor with nodes for us to attach to, I can assure you that we can make broadband available in these rural communities at an economic price that people can afford. Certainly the high density areas are going to continue to be serviced by the traditional telephone entities and cable companies, but when you get into low density areas, we have to initially do it with wireless communications. And it can be done. We've done it. We're going to continue to improve on it, and we need pipe. And we'll put the pipe in. We'll put the fiber in the pipe if you put it on the road corridor. Thank you.
So, did you want to follow up on this specifically? Okay, go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you. So I think, the Department of Economic Opportunity has rural staff who assist our rural communities in accessing programs that have been created. And I remember the presentation last week on the workforce component of this effort to make sure that folks in these communities can work on these projects. I was wondering if staff could speak to, or if we could come back to, whether the communities will get assistance on this kind of technical assistance as you develop the corridors, so that they can effectively work with FDOT staff to make these plans and be able to make the investments that would be required to accomplish something like Bill has described.
You want to answer, or you want to weigh in?
Sure. So 1 second when it connects. There is some 2.0 language going through legislature that does earmark some money for broadband. So we got to craft what that means. But I do believe in our interpretation, it means supporting exactly what you say. How do we plan? How do we engage? And how do we move forward with broadband expansion?
Okay, so we have quite a few questions. Are you following up? Okay, and you still have a different question? All the tents that are up are probably all we're going to be able to get through.
So very similar to Sherry's question. And of course, Eric talked about laying dark fiber, which means fiber that is not lit. So the city will light what they use for their purposes, which is fantastic. But my question kind of that lingered from last month's it seems like it was a week ago, meeting was, what is the appetite, one, and Bill can maybe speak to this question, of the people that have said the density isn't there, or there's not a customer base, or that sort of thing. We're fortunate to have a local ISP that has lit some of the fiber in our area for the benefit of building their own business. But at the same time, what is FDOT or the state or the federal government doing to incentivize, or what are the conversations around incentivizing companies to come into areas that there might not be the customer base available from a numbers perspective, but there's a need in that area for closing that digital divide?
I hate to put you on the spot, but Mike, would you like to talk about the recent experience with CenturyLink?
Yeah, as Bill went through in Hardee County over the last 10 years, actually before I was involved, he actually reached out to CenturyLink to begin with, and they really had no interest in upgrading much in Hardee County. But after basically a competitor came in with some broadband technology, now I was looking at the boxes hanging on the wall in my office this morning. It's not lit up yet, but there's fiber running into my office, and I'm 3 miles from town, basically in the woods. And I guarantee that wouldn't have happened without the competition of the wireless provider coming in.
So Eric, yeah, and then
Add to that just real quick. If there were a trunk line that were to follow this corridor that we're talking about, there are opportunities. I think what inhibits smaller providers many times is that they don't have the capital, they don't have the means by which to put in all of the infrastructure necessary in order to build out a network. And so that was the opportunity that we had in Winter Haven with one of our small local internet providers, is that when we put the fiber in the ground, we have the ability to lease that fiber to the provider. So he doesn't have the capital cost of putting in the infrastructure, digging the ditch and putting in the pipe and everything. And so there are opportunities. I think there was somebody here from DEO. DEO offers a Florida Job Growth Grant that is for infrastructure needs to pursue job growth that is available. That's funded. I think it'll be funded again, in the coming year. There's opportunities for these smaller communities. If a trunk line were along this corridor, they could seek grant opportunities to help them build out small networks in their rural communities that would attract these smaller providers. You're likely not going to get the large nationwide providers because they just don't have the customer base. But some of these smaller providers will come in and provide service if they have less of a capital cost up front.
Eric mentioned earlier that we have a Polk County broadband plan that was put together with cooperation from all the municipalities working with Central Florida Regional Planning Council. One thing that we learned is you got to have cooperation. I mean, even though Lakeland has a lot of fiber, Winter Haven has fiber, Auburndale has fiber, Haines City has fiber, we need to connect all those municipal fiber networks, which would create a lot more opportunity in the county, but that requires money. So maybe one thing that we can learn through these corridor studies is how to create more cooperation between the municipalities and the state to help these extremely rural areas get connected. Just like a road, fiber's not good in one spot. It's got to be connected out. So if we can create processes and procedures that help us enable cooperation between municipalities and between municipalities and the state, that would be very helpful, I think.
Great. So now I'm going to go back to the 10th. So Glenn, you still have yours up?
Yeah, just real briefly, with South Florida State College, and of course we have campuses in Hardee, DeSoto, and Highlands counties. We struggle with the access to the internet. That is a huge issue for our students. I have a brand new iPhone 10. My students have iPhone 11s. It doesn't stop, and the demand is so incredibly high, we can't keep up with it. We doubled our Wi-Fi access on our Highlands campus. And the next day, it was all consumed, literally consumed completely. My IT person came, it's like, where to go? We could triple it and quadruple it, it's still not enough. Broadband is essential to economic development for businesses, but you can't have businesses if you don't have workers. We train workers, that's what we do. And they have to have access for continuing education purposes. We have to have access on our campuses at a high level. And we're really challenged by that in all three of our counties. What they've done in Hardee has certainly been very helpful. And I applaud Bill and the County Commission for putting money towards that effort. But we don't have that last mile over in Highlands County that really meets our needs, and we struggle with CenturyLink, and we've been moving towards Comcast and other providers to make this work for us. So just wanted to share the importance of getting it to the homes where students live and the small businesses. They really struggle getting quality access.
Great. This is all helping for guiding principle discussion. So I'm going to go to Bill and then Elizabeth and then Jennifer. Pat, you'll be last. We need to, did you want to?
Sure. So Bill Ferry, Florida Internet and Television Association. Just a bit of a comment, I'll put it into a question here, is again what Mark is saying about the importance of having a utility easement where providers can put in their own lines. That's music to my ears. In our opinion, that is the best way to bring broadband to the rural communities, is ensuring that we are able to do that. Rights of way, getting permits approved on time. I just can't tell you how important that is to do that. One of the other issues, and I think Ms. Kate had brought it up, is how do you get a provider to provide that last mile service. And there's a whole push I see with governments, local governments, to look into what's called the middle mile of putting in that fiber. And then if you build it, they will come. There are some concerns with that from the standpoint of having that as a workable model. But I think there are some possibilities on how that might work when it comes to allowing the providers to, like I say, putting their own lines. There are situations where there could be some cost effectiveness where when government owns those lines. I think we providers need to take a look at that. Being able to do that is a challenge. There's always a cautionary tale with governments, and I do throw that out. I think, Bill, you have some experience with the Florida Broadband Alliance. Those ventures, again, government needs to be very careful about what they spend on that. Wondering if you could maybe talk about that a little bit of what are those concerns, and then also maybe with the city is talk about what some of your achievements are from that way.
I personally would like.
It just takes a minute. Hold on.
Hello?
There.
I personally would like all of our broadband systems to be totally private sector, but I think government can provide a corridor if they want to pay for the conduit to go in the ground when the road is being built, and then have competitive bidding for companies to put fiber into the pipes. That's probably the best way to do it. There's certainly a need. The education system has a fiber network called Lambert Rail, I believe, but Lambda Rail is really not appropriate for business and residential use. It's mainly for research, and it has to be private sector. And again, Winter Haven, Lakeland, even Sebring, it makes a lot of sense to use fiber in those areas, but we are getting really good with fixed wireless internet. We can put a gig of service to someone today. We have just upgraded to a 5G technology on our system. It's not the same as the mobile 5G, but it is 5G technology. And it's improving every day, but it still needs a fiber backbone. The BTOP grant program that was run by the NTIA was a failure because it was strictly a middle mile program, and no one thought about last mile providers but us. And we recruited a last mile provider first. And that is basically from the standpoint of, think about the way you get your electricity. The middle mile being the transmission lines. They're worthless to your house. You have to have that last mile, the guy that drives up in the little yellow or white pickup truck to make sure your electricity is working at your house. Same thing with broadband. You can have all of the major trunks of broadband across the state, fiber networks, but if there's not someone that's going to take that and connect it to one of the tier 1 data centers, or 2, there's 4 in the state, Cogent, Level 3, CenturyLink, Plaza of the Americas in Miami, and I think there's one up in Jacksonville, but those 4 have to be connected to that fiber or it's worthless. So does that help?
Absolutely.
And again, we do thank you for the additional investment you've made in Hardee County. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. You didn't do it, whoever did it. Thank you.
Right.
So Elizabeth, please, and then Jennifer.
Hi, Elizabeth Fleming with Defenders of Wildlife. And first of all, some of what I'm going to ask you may have answered because you are speaking an entirely different language than what I generally speak, so bear with me. But a number of us have wondered about the connection between the roads and broadband in particular. I mean, I don't think anybody disputes the fact that rural communities should certainly have access to good, efficient communication systems and all of that. But my understanding, and it may not be accurate, is that there needs to be a certain level of subscriptions to produce revenue in a community for the service providers to be there. And if a very sparsely populated community with low density, those tend to be the communities without this type of service. So it seems like the connection between the road could also be that the road is going to bring people into these areas and help grow the communities, so to speak. So can someone address that connection?
Terry, yeah, you want to go? Go ahead, David.
Well, I think that's goes back to his question as well. What's working? You know, the city of Lakeland first started installing fiber probably in 1990 to control the electric grid, you know, which was a requirement for Lakeland Electric, and continued to expand the fiber to all of our city functions run on our own fiber now. And as I mentioned, that probably saves the city about $3 million a year. It's capital intensive to roll out a fiber network. And that's why these rural areas do not have it. It's not a big money-making opportunity for the internet service providers. They still need fiber. And I think that's why we have to have government involved, whether it's cities, the state. If we make it as easy as possible for municipalities, for counties, for regions to install their own fiber. I mean, we've offered to lease fiber back to the ISPs to make it less capital intensive for them to roll out into other areas. They don't really want to do that sometimes. You know, it is a money-making thing, and it should be for them. So we're willing to get into competition with them if we have to in Lakeland, just to make sure we have what we need. We have looked at being our own ISP. And again, we had to be very careful as a government. It's very capital intensive. Lakeland's next step now is we're going out with another RFP to see if we can have a public-private partnership, because we want more competition in our area. But I think to meet the needs of these really rural areas, it's going to require state involvement and municipal involvement, as well as continuing to encourage private companies to be involved. But maybe we can use state funds or municipal funds to make it a little easier for new entries of some of these smaller ISP companies.
So just like Terry said, you're absolutely right. There has to be a certain number of subscriptions. There has to be enough people to want to use for the ISP to come and provide the services. And so that's where I mentioned earlier dark fiber, and that's what the city of Winter Haven has been doing. Is we simply put in the conduit and the fiber in the ground. The city of Winter Haven pays for it, puts it in the ground, but it sits there. It's not lit, and that's what dark fiber is. And we invite internet providers to come and lease strands of fiber from the city. And so these smaller providers that we're talking about, that's an opportunity to start a new business in these rural areas, to bring a small provider. They can lease a strand of fiber and provide services in these rural communities where some of these other, bigger name, Comcast and Verizon and whoever, aren't necessarily willing to make that investment. And so it creates opportunity. I think, what we're looking for here is opportunity. Some of the wins that we've had in Winter Haven was with Polk State College. And I don't know the exact numbers, but we were able to extend the municipal fiber line out to Polk State College. And I think we doubled or tripled your capacity for half the cost, something like that, from what they were paying to a private provider. There are other, and we're fortunate. We're one of those hubs in the state, right in the center of Winter Haven is one of those hubs. We have a facility there where all of the trunk lines come through right through the city of Winter Haven. But still, even then, we're 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we started doing this, we were a community of 30,000 people. We're not a big city, and so still we had these large providers. We had one, I think, in the city, and so we're just trying to create more opportunity to get more people connected. And provide those services in our community.
If I may, we've been wanting to, we're running out of time, and so I know we still have some people with questions. The other thing we want to do at this point in time is talk about guiding principles. So if as you've heard some of the discussion this morning, how does that lend towards guiding principles that you think you want to bring back for the afternoon discussion, or for now? I mean, we really want to have the discussion now, because everybody gets a little tired by the afternoon. So I don't know if any of your questions were going to be related to that. So we can, can we continue a little bit? Jennifer and Pat both say yes. So Jennifer?
So I really liked the comment from one of the panelists about potential opportunity for recreational and utility corridors being sort of co-located. And in terms of water and wastewater utilities and efficiencies of scale, one of the things that we see as a regulatory agency is some of these small, very small communities or even small RV parks or situations where there's a small wastewater treatment plant or water treatment plant. There's a lot of problems with those oftentimes. And so sometimes the solution to that is really hooking up to a larger municipal or regional system. And you know, it certainly solves a lot of problems. And to do that, you have to have some interconnectedness and the infrastructure to make that happen. And so I certainly think that, you know, potentially guiding principle, just throwing it out there, maximizing opportunities for providing corridors, and that might be the wrong word, but for utility and fiber expansion and interconnectedness. And then my second thought is thinking about Paul's question about how do we bolster the economies of rural communities and diversify them without turning them into an urban community or something completely different, losing their character. And so I'm from the coast, so I think of tourism. And, you know, it's the #1 industry in the state. I think with agriculture is a strong second. But I think it's a big opportunity for the rural communities. We have, you know, the Florida Greenways and Trails program. People like to get out of the urban areas and into the green areas and agricultural areas. And so there's an opportunity to think about connecting with Florida Greenways and Trails with these multi-use trails that are, you know, specifically talked about in the legislation. There's a program with the Office of Greenways and Trails in DEP called Trail Towns, and there's no trail towns designated in this region that we're talking about here at the task force, but there are in other parts of the state. So communities will get designated as a trail town, get sort of free advertisement, if you will, and kind of it's a draw then for folks to get off the trail and go to some of these communities. So I think there's opportunities to maximize some of these kind of multi-use, non-motorized trails. And I love the idea of co-locating it with an area for utilities to go. So that might be two different guiding principles, or they could be combined to maximize those opportunities in association with this corridor.
All right. Others in agreement to that, or Pat, you want to offer some ideas or comments?
I really wanted to kind of summarize a little bit, and also to say, in the broadband discussion particularly, because I know that's been one of the things I think that our task force is struggling with. Some of us know a lot about it, some of us know a little about it, some of us know we have a phone and we turn on our computer and it comes up. So from the perspective, I just think it's interesting that we're listening to the city of Lakeland, which is the largest city in my region, 110,000 people, but an urban service area of 300,000 people probably total. And Hardy County, which is the second most rural county of the 9 counties that we're looking at. And those are two areas where broadband coordination, planning, and deployment have occurred. There's been other efforts in other counties of the rural counties. But the truth is, what they've just talked about, Hardy County tells you the possibilities, and that including these things in the corridor will help make that possible in the other rural counties as well as enhance Hardy. There are also the southern area of Polk County is just like those rural counties. It doesn't have the services that the I-4 and Central Park does. So it will also make those opportunities there as well. In terms of the utility corridor, to me, that's really what this legislation laid out to begin with, that we were talking about multimodal, include the trails, include transit alternatives for the future, include maybe a rail envelope, include lots of things. But I think maybe if we use the term as multi-utility, because that is one of the biggest challenges we have in transportation is getting all our utilities in, because they require certain separations. They require a lot of significant engineering things that we will not talk about in this task force. But every time a road gets changed or moved or widened or anything happens to it, we are continually moving utility lines. We're continually disrupting businesses, schools, communities, the environment. And those are all things I think we can avoid. And my final comment as a planner is that we have a problem that I sometimes don't often say, but we have a problem with rural sprawl. So the idea that all sprawl is urban in nature, I would argue is not true. When we don't have centralized utilities, when we don't have access to water and wastewater and broadband and others, we can't establish those communities that have a smaller footprint and ultimately are more environmentally sensitive. When we really encourage urban rural sprawl, we encourage septic tanks and other things that don't lend our good environmental stewardship. So I see all this going together, and automatically building a road does not automatically give you a new development. I will ask you to drive Florida's Turnpike and go to Yeehaw Junction.
So,
Amen.
Okay, Andrew, did you have some guiding principle discussion?
Part of our responsibility in the legislation is to evaluate the economic impacts of certain things, and this question really goes to the broadband part of the panel. We've been given some financial information about the construction of roadways like Wakaiva, and in the packet today, there's some other good financial information. So my question would be, would a $100 million stimulus package or P3 or some type of investment by the state help connect the first mile, middle mile, last mile between the urbanized counties and the rural counties? There's 9 counties, I believe. So would $100 million help? Because that's 2 miles of construction.
Heck yeah. It may be a $500 million, but we'll take $100 million. It's a start.
Karen, can I interject for a second?
Sure.
First of all, we are talking about technology, right? I just want to let task force members know, we did not mention this before in our opening remarks. You do have Wi-Fi access here.
Oh, yes,
it's public. It's, if you look up, it'll pop up as public. It's unsecured network. So it's your choice if you want to go on the network, but thanks to Highlands County for providing that access to us. But the one point that I want to make is, as you're talking about guiding principles, there's one point that I think Robert mentioned, which is provide, one of the things that you may want to consider is those opportunities for partnerships, right? How do you create those opportunities for partnerships to leverage larger providers to provide for the smaller communities, and looking at that as a guide, as a possible guiding principle.
Do you want to continue, or should we move on? Yeah, I know there's a few tents up, and I just want, we are over time. Did you want to?
Well, why don't we go through another 5 minutes of conversation and then we'll move on.
All right. So Ken was first, and then Sherry.
Ken Doherty, Charlotte County. Just an overall question for y'all. Recognizing what the chairman said earlier, that usually the road rights of way are established, and then you decide to come in and put utilities in there. This is an opportunity for the corridor, which the alignment has not been defined yet. Have you all done enough conceptual master planning? I think, Bill, you talked about talking to some of the municipalities in the Polk County areas. Yeah, you show us where you're going to put this road, and we'll get the facilities there. Have you done enough work, conceptual master planning of, I don't care if it's water supply, wastewater collection, fiber, whatever. Have you done enough master planning conceptually to understand and help DOT influence the alignment? And because this is an opportunity for y'all
and which you normally don't get.
No, I can tell you. However, we will immediately work on that once we have an idea where the corridor is. There's a difference in the road being within 5 miles of a municipality and 25 miles of a municipality, and we have to get that corridor defined. Pat Steed, I'm sure, is chomping at the bit to weigh in on those various issues in this entire area. But we've got to have a little more definition.
So Robert, if I may, you've done some master planning. Do you have any guidance about what should be done in a master planning in terms of potential?
So I think from a water and sewer perspective, I think that there is likely some high-level master planning that could influence where this corridor will be placed. Looking at some of the things that we've talked about here, so who are and where are some of the rural communities that we may want to positively impact, to provide resources? What are major water supply areas that we may want to place this corridor near in order to connect those supplies? Who are the major utilities in these counties that would likely be the ones to come in and put infrastructure in these corridors? I think from a water sewer standpoint, there is some very high level master planning that could be done to provide some thoughts around water and sewer and how the corridor and its placement could impact the potential for water and sewer to be impacted throughout all of these communities.
And if I could add to that, again, being involved in the Polk Regional Water Cooperative, that effort's been off the ground now for a couple of years. There is master planning that's already been completed. There's conceptual designs. We've got pipeline routes that traverse the county, Polk County. So certainly we're looking for corridors, PRWC, and Polk County utilities and other utilities are always looking for corridors that are friendly, so to speak, from a design and construction standpoint. So I think there's some opportunities right there from a regional perspective.
And then, Jerry, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think we get it backwards here. It's not we're not saying that we master plan all this and then you can know where you're going to put the corridor. My apologies. If they come, we will build it. There's no infrastructure problem with water and wastewater. The master plan will occur when we, as Bill Lambert said, when we know where it's needed. And there's no real impediment to getting that done, even for small cities.
Just wait. Go.
I might add that Jerry represents Bowling Green and Zoffo. Terry Ashley is here from the city of Wauchula. Terry and I have had several lengthy discussions about infrastructure, but we've got to have a little more definition from you guys as it moves down the road before we can really take positive action.
So Sherry, did you have some guiding principles to recommend?
Exactly. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. I wanted to express support for what LK said, but maybe in terms of guiding principles, I don't think I have the words currently, but some coordination, some collaborative effort that lives beyond the task force that has that express purpose, right? Master planning, working with the RPCs or the MPOs or whoever it is, and involves public and private partnerships, so that you have that coordinated effort. I mean, I appreciate we've talked a lot about broadband today. I think it's critically important. But I think water, sewer, gas, all of those need to be part of the conversation. So I don't know what that formally looks like if you all have examples for us, but that general concept is a guiding principle, whatever the specific wording is.
I think one guiding principle would be if you dig a hole, put a conduit in it. Because fiber is going it doesn't matter where it's going, left or right, put a conduit in it.
Did you want to weigh in again, too?
Yeah, just one additional comment. There was an issue with regard to what cities would be best benefit. I just want wrap our arms around this issue. The median income for a household in the town of Zolfo Springs is $25,972 in the last census in 2017, and the median income for a family was $27,188. It's easy for us to come and discuss these high-minded principles, but to them it's just basically, can I get a job, and can I keep my kids from having to move away to find a job once they get out of high school?
Gary? guiding principles or follow-up?
Well, yeah, just to follow up, I listening to this discussion, I'm kind of getting somewhat of a different perspective and looking outside the box instead of looking at a single road as a corridor and listening to Bill and others discuss. And Pat, Pat and I generally agree, but she's probably not going to agree with my thoughts here. But as I look at north-south and east-west, especially in these rural areas, I keep on asking myself, is there opportunities to expand and improve east-west corridors along with existing north-south corridors that run kind of parallel to one another? And I guess I will use Okeechobee and Yeehaw Junction as an example. Highway 60 now is 4-lane right to Yeehaw Junction. And for those of you all that have not been there, it's a pretty busy intersection right now. And the first thing that has happened is that you have a huge new gas station there. And that is bustling right now. Okeechobee, Highway 70 now is 4-lane, all the way from Fort Pierce into Okeechobee. And that has, I think, created more business, created more people coming through Okeechobee. And that has made huge improvements. And one of the things that's happened too with that one, which was, I think, designed many years ago, you have a bike path, a 21-mile bike path along there that a lot of people are beginning to use. So that's a recreation as well. Just some food for thought on that.
Yeah, the task force has talked quite a bit about connectivity. It's not just north-south, it's being able to connect back to communities and that. So that fits into that. Any other guiding principle recommendations before? You can mull it over too. We will be talking that later this afternoon. We just wanted an opportunity while this panel was fresh. Well, thank you. Oh, Pat's going to weigh in.
Just to reiterate, I've said it many times, but hopefully it'll be in the guiding principles. Connectivity to the regional roadway network. And yes, I agree with everything you said, Mr. Ritter.
This concludes this online module for the Suncoast Corridor. FDOT thanks you for your continued involvement with the task force and appreciates your efforts in viewing all 4 online modules for task force meeting number 5.